Welcome to this episode of Arizona Barrio Stories. I'm Irma, and I'm here today to remind you we are interested in your story. Your story is important to us. Sometimes we forget a little bit about our history, those that have come before us, that have made the way for many of us. Today's guest is going to give us a little of his background and how he has made an impact on our community. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Juan Alvarez.
And Juan, tell me, before we get into depth of what you had been doing, tell us, where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Texas, and I grew up west of Casa Grande, Arizona, in Stanfield. And that's where I still have relatives there. And therefore, as a child, I grew up in the migrant camps there around. The main industry then at that point in time of me growing up was cotton.
So you were a cotton picker, or?
Well, my parents were cotton pickers, and my family, the adults, were cotton pickers, and obviously they were trying to teach me to pick cotton.
And when did that focal, that light bulb hit you that maybe there was something else for you?
Well, because we knew that, for example, in the fields that we were growing and people were talking about picking cotton and they're finding better futures, we could see automation coming. And what we could head count of people around us were over 1,000 people picking cotton with in different camps. And the automation was coming as fast as you could see the cotton picking machines coming in a little bit at a time. And we were being replaced. But more importantly, we were trying to find a way, or at least my parents and were finding a way, how do we improve our life, our standard? We had no benefits whatsoever. Everything that you did picking cotton was an incentive. And the incentive was $3, 100 pounds of cotton.
Wow.
So if you could pick 200 pounds, that's only $6 a day, if you could make that.
And it was, for a family of how many?
Well, big families. Sometimes you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 families, and that's why the children were invited to come pick cotton to add to the payroll, if you please. Obviously, we lived in camps where we didn't pay rent, but nevertheless, the camps were not the best condition to live in, and number one. Number two, it was a community bathroom, if you want to call it that, and we had no shower facilities or anything like that. That's an example of how I grew up. And then families continue following the crops throughout the different parts of U.S., Southwest, for example. For one, I went to about 8 different elementary schools before I got to the 8th grade, and consequently, I missed out a lot of activities. And one of the activities, obviously, that I missed out on is establishing my roots within any other communities, and my roots are still in Stanfield, Arizona, and that's where it's at.
And a common thread, a common story we hear about families that are migrant families is they end up at many, many different schools. Where did you end up attending high school?
In Maricopa, and then I dropped out, and then I started working in the fields because we had to make up the subsidize of the family living. So, and then after that, I returned, went back, and people encouraged me to go back to school. I was able to get my GED and then start taking classes at Phoenix College. And then I went. I also recruited at the University of Wisconsin, and also went to Hispanic International, and then I took advantage of anything that I could learn from anybody who would teach me something. My grandma would always say to me, listen to the people who have some knowledge, respect the elderly, but more than that, follow the advice, because if you don't follow the advice, your life will be very short.
And back in that time period, did you have any mentors helping you along the way prior to Chicanos por la Causa, prior to Valle de Sol, prior to the big name places that ended up coming in the late 60s? Did you have anybody guiding you along the way?
Well, obviously my parents. I stand on the shoulders of my parents in my youth, my grandparents. But more than that, when I was recruited in the summer of 1965, the person that recruited me was Gustavo Gutierrez, and I met his wife, and then through him I met then Lauro Garcia, and then I met his wife, and then after that, then I met Fred Ross, and then I was among the very few privileged to attend classes with Fred Ross, and that was in late 1965, 66, and 67. So I was being trained to be a community organizer, and throughout the different contexts and experiences, I always found mentors and teachers, and I always looked. Dolores Huerta had a big say over the overall program, and Cesar Chavez was one of those who I met a number of times, was going as the third person going to Delano.
Now, during that time period, I always ask people, is that when the bug bit you? Is that when you knew that, hey, I want to do this? Community organization, that's my thing.
Yes, it was because once I started learning more about what had been denied to us as a community, whether it was civil rights, having better working conditions, being part of an industry with very low wages, and then I saw what was going in California and Delano. Then they get me a whole different criteria to go forward and not only help my community, but bring forward new ideas to our community that will grow out of it and benefit. That was the principle, is benefiting others by my work.
Please try again.
And so, the benefit, I always thought that the community would come first, and apparently in the history of those who have been involved in the movement, a lot of communities benefit from it.
And I bet you there was a lot of resistance from...
Oh, yes, there were a lot of resistance during the whole period of time, because if people did not... We were competing, for example, with the local radio station, because the local radio station announcers would address the audience as La Colonia Mexicana, the colony of Mexico. And it didn't sit right. We cannot be a colony of Mexico when we live in the United States. When I was the second or third generation born in this country, by being called La Colonia, that was, in my mind, I could never understand that, and I could never accept it, because once I knew that we were citizens of this country, although we were being treated as second citizens, but we were still citizens born in this country. And to me, that never sat right.
And it's even worse when the resistance is coming from your own people.
Not only that, but then some of our own people who didn't really wanted to be part of the movement would always give us a lot of different names, brands, whether we were members of the Communist Party or any other kind of party that didn't fit. And we would simply say, let's examine the history our state, for example, we don't have to go very far. The history of our state was that that we were recruited to come to pick cotton, and then number one. Further back, you know, they always make fun and say, you know, you came across the fence or you came across the river. But if you look at the real history is, we didn't jump the fence or jump the river. The fence and the river jumped us. We've been here before that ever happened. So there's a lot of discussion and study needs to be done to really understand the history where we come from.
Well, their ignorance has given us labels that are unfounded, and it's unfortunate those labels have still stuck.
Not only that, but then in the most recent years, you know, those people who do not want change, and we're seeking change to improve the life of our children and grandchildren, are always coming with very terrible narratives, saying, labeling us with something that we are not. We are not. And obviously, you know, we always discuss some of these negative things that come to us, and they said, no, that's not true.
I'm going to fast forward you to about 1966, 67, with the birth of Chicanos por la Causa. Could you tell me who was the group? Who were the people that were instrumental?
Well, the success of that group was because we had success because the community helped us, and any success in any of the movement is really belong to the community. It doesn't belong to me and even to nobody else. The community was able to help us in their own way. Getting back to 67, 68, at that point I got involved with the boycott from California, and also traveled to Delano in 67. As I said previous, had taken classes from Fred Ross with Lauro Garcia Jr. and Gustavo Gutierrez, and traveled to. I was assigned to go to a campaign, and the campaign was the Gallo wine company in Modesto, and I was there a month. So I learned all of the techniques that I was taught with Fred Ross, but then came back to Arizona to apply it in the farm workers movement here in Arizona. And consequently, those who were involved in the movement, in the farm workers, planned for the strike, and then came along Chicanos por la Causa. We were one. We were Joe Eddie Lopez, for example. And we were others, Agustin Cardona, Nelly Soto, Carolina Rosales, and many others who helped form this movement up to Chicanos por la Causa. And then in 72, the recall, prior to recall, there was the walkout, and after the walkouts was a recall of Governor Jack Williams. So all of this came about in having some kind of social change to improve our community. As an example, I can give you, back in 50-some years ago, when we were beginning to seek better working conditions, better wages or hourly wages for the farm workers, it was less than $1 an hour.
Wow.
And if you look at the newspaper now and start looking at some of the farmers who are looking for farm workers, they're seeking, trying to recruit people to go to work for them for $25 an hour. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
I don't know of the conditions, and I'm not meaning to say that we need to go that route. I'm just saying you can tell the difference. And among the whole process, there were also persons like Denny Ortega, who helped us form the success story, or the success story of the community. And I think it's very important that we give credit to the community, not to ourselves.
Correct.
And the merit of our work tells the community who we are. The work, the accomplishments, is a sign of our commitment.
Now, back then in the early days, could you tell us or tell the audience what were the priorities? You just mentioned wages, farm workers. Were there other priorities that you guys focused on?
Oh yes, we focus on getting people to register to vote, get them to vote, give them options to be part of whatever party you want to be part of, but vote, and that's always been the
forefront.
The forefront. Vote and bring in your elect your favorite candidates. I think that where we need for more emphasis then and now is in school boards, because that's where we trust our beloved children, and we need to be part of that, and it's our future. I tell my children and my grandchildren, who are now young adults, the future, my future depends on you, because you are the future, and we don't invest ourselves in the future, then we're going to have other problems besides what we're having now.
So the priorities then, it don't sound like they've changed much. I mean, we're still pushing getting people to register to vote, make your voice heard. Education is still at the forefront. And could you mention any other big obstacles that might have gotten in your way back then in keeping with your goals?
Oh, very definitely. I think that one of the things that the people or the powers to be always come up with another way of distracting us from the real issues. And we can see it in the present time, whereby immigration, for example, that we've been involved since, is now taking a second or third seat in the discussion, because we're talking about totally something else. It's unfortunately that we do not have updated immigration laws, and that's been one of the issues that we had before, and we still have it. I've been involved in figuring out a way of coming up with a method of improving the immigration laws. I truly believe that if those using their numbers and whatever millions you want to talk about are willing to work and willing to pay their income tax, chances are that through those taxes of employment, we'd probably eliminate the debt in this country. And a lot of people can't help it. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And they don't see that value. They say, well, they're always finding a way of saying, you need to go back home. We're here. Home is here.
They're repeating the same thing they said back in the 60s.
Exactly.
And I agree with you about the distractions. Where do you see the future now of Chicanos por la Causa? I've seen from the 60s to now, and it seems like you guys are expanding so much in other states. Tell me what you see going on with the future of the organization.
Well, I really cannot speak. I'm not really a spokesman of Chicanos por la Causa. I was the person who started it 54 years ago. But I think that what I've seen and what I was told, Chicanos por la Causa has been very successful. And during the success stories, there have been some mistakes made. However, we've learned from the mistakes.
Absolutely.
Number one. And number two, I think that we need to promote the history of our community. Because if we don't know where we come from, are we going to know where we're going?
Exactly.
And so that's so important, number one. Number two, we need to develop our own self-pride of who we are. Our space. It's important, because we have to then, knowing our space, then we need to then promote self-respect and seek self-respect. in our as parents, as grandparents, as future going forward. It's important that we learn from our mistakes and continue on finding ways of promoting our own standing in the community. And it's the community who will benefit from this, and the community will take care of you. Trust me on that one.
What are you doing now?
I'm retired. I try to provide help to those who need help. Have a couple of 3 young people who we're trying to help go through school. We also do a lot of volunteer work at the parish and try to help them through the parish work.
I want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you for giving us history. I always tell people I'm a retired educator, but I'm not really retired. You never retire. The history books give Arizona, Mexicanos, Chicanos this much history. The curriculum doesn't show a lot of what happened in the past. And I'm glad that we're learning from you today, and I'm glad that you were the first CEO. ¿Que no?
Sí.
I'm glad that you were able to set the goal for people, and I want to thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really am truly humbled on this opportunity. Thank you.
And thank you for being a member of Arizona Barrio Stories. Our goal is to educate and to share our stories. I want to thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for viewing today. Our history is important. Traditions are important. Education is important. Today's history lesson, we hope you share. And always think of whose shoulders do you stand on? Think of the other people that went way before us, that paved the way. Thank you for viewing today, and we hope you share this site, and we invite you to invite others. Thank you from Arizona Barrio Stories. We will see you again.
Hello, my name is David Adame, President and CEO of Chicanos por la Causa. Today, I would like to announce our brand new exciting partnership with Arizona Barrio Stories. Arizona Barrio Stories is a key part of our community and in line with what we believe in, restoring Chicano history and making sure that we continue to celebrate Mexican traditions, history, family, and culture. Arizona Barrio Stories will play an important role in bringing you important stories about Chicanos por la Causa and the founders who helped build Chicanos por la Causa, but also other key important stories about our Chicano community here in Arizona. We look forward to a wonderful partnership, and thank you for your continued support.